Today's topic is understanding value and analyzing deals in your market, right? And we were just talking about this in your market. Your market doesn't have to be where you live. Your market's where you invest, right? And that could be anywhere. So, like I was just saying, I've been investing recently out in the Pittsburgh area. I was mostly Delaware County and Philadelphia based, and then pushed out to Montgomery County, and then pushed out even further to Carbon County and Lehigh County. And now I'm all the way on the other side of the state in Pittsburgh, because as I've pushed out and acquired properties, it's gotten more expensive to buy in those areas. I was just talking to an investor friend / client today that I introduced to the Carbon County region a couple of years ago, and I haven't been bidding on deals in that area for probably about a year now. I've already moved further out, and he was telling me, the offers they're putting in, they're bidding against cash offers from, these large investment firms and New York buyers. So the market catches up to you, and if you're if you're investing in a market and it no longer matches your buy box, don't be afraid to move. You don't have to stay. You can keep your properties and let them appreciate, but find areas that make sense for you in your market. So hopefully that makes sense. So today's analyzing deals in your market and understanding the value of those deals. And value is super important because, as we all know, if you don't know what the property is worth after you buy it or after you fix it up or what you're buying, you can end up buying a bad deal, right? So first off, as normal, important legal stuff. Just so you know, we're recording this. This content will be put on all of our social media platforms. We make no representations or warranties. Everything we're teaching is just free information. Feel free to use it, but don't use it against us. There's someone coming in. Hey, how you doing? Can pop in. So just getting started, actually. So good timing.
Okay.
No, it's all good. All right. So who are we? Who am I? I'm Will Holder. I run the William Holder Realty Team. I also invest in real estate. It's why I got into real estate, was to invest in real estate, and ended up finding a passion in selling real estate in order to buy real estate. So I'm in all assets of real estate. I'm in all facets of real estate, on the brokerage side, on title, investings, on a team. We're involved in everything. Why I run this group is for this reason. I want to, one, educate people on real estate investing, hopefully prevent them from making the mistakes I made early on in my real estate investing career, which were a lot and very hurtful. And hopefully help people build wealth and eventually hopefully partner with those people and do bigger things along the way, because I've found that the most successful way for me to invest is with partnerships versus me doing it all on my own, right? You might be able to do a flip on your own or take down a couple of units on your own, but as you start to scale, it becomes more cumbersome. It is a hobby for now and eventually becomes your full-time, but whilst it's a hobby, you still have your job, you still have everything else going on. And if you have partners, it helps. Today, we were vetting property managers for a property we're buying out near Pittsburgh. And, one of my partners, his job was to call and vet property managers. And my job was to talk to the lender. And the other partner was to talk to the contractors. So we were able to do all of that because we have a partnership and we know our roles. And it really helped. So that's our goal. That's my goal for this. Connect with me, cell phone 610-657-6215, or will@williamholderrealty.com, or williamholderrealty.com, or William Holder Realty Team on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok. We're everywhere. So feel free to reach out. All right. Grid is a global real estate community built for investors by investors. This is strictly in real estate investing. So This has nothing to do with my real estate team or any other aspects of what I do in real estate. This is just for real estate investors. People want to come learn, meet people, grow, and understand how to grow your wealth for real estate. I'm not a guru, I'm not charging for anything. I don't really want to ever be considered that. I don't want to be an influencer or anything like that. No interest in any of that. Just want to help people around me grow. And this is the way I know to do it. And we use a lot of real deals. So a lot of the examples you'll see in these classes are real deals either I have done or I have worked with clients to do. Those are the examples I know, so they're the ones I'm going to use. All right, and our mission is to connect, learn from, and collaborate with like-minded people interested in building wealth and creating impact through real estate investing and business ownership. Okay. There's a little bit more about Grid and the Grid community. There's a lot of members. It keeps growing. Investors use a variety of methods to determine the value of a property. What do you currently use to find out what a property is worth? Now, there's multiple types of property classes, right? You have your basic single-family residential rental, which can be a home by itself. It could be a row home, it could be a twin. That's one unit, even if it's not completely separate. And 1 through 4 units are all considered residential. So if you have a duplex, triplex, or a quad, that's all in the residential sphere, right? It fits under regular conforming financing, and you can get regular loans for it. It's not considered commercial unless one of those units is a commercial space. So if you have 2 apartments above a storefront, then that's a commercial building, right? And the financing is different. But when we're talking about 1 through 4, in terms of unit counts, residential unit counts, the way you're going to evaluate the value of the property is using comparable sales, right? It's important to know that above 4 units or commercial properties, they don't use that method. They use a version of that method to come up with like a value per unit, but they usually use cap rates and other formulas to come up with the value of commercial real estate. All right. So don't try to run comps on a 20-unit building. You're not going to find it, right? Not in that market, not anytime soon. Usually there's not multiple 20-unit buildings selling within a year of each other in one market. It doesn't happen. So it doesn't happen often, at least. So when we're talking about residential 1 through 4 units, we're using comparable sales, which are usually very similar sales within the last year. It's almost what an appraiser would do. It's exactly what an appraiser would do. And the reason this is helpful for real estate investors, when you're buying a fixer-upper, you want to know what it's worth on the back end. And the quicker you know that, the better you know your market, the easier it is to evaluate that deal and figure out if it's a good deal, right? So you're not scrambling for information. You're not searching for someone to help you evaluate the deal. Yeah, if you have a good agent, they can certainly do that. But if you're able to run the numbers yourself, it makes it quicker to make a decision. So this class is basically coming up with how you find out what the after repair value of a property is in this instance. And so being able to determine the ARV or after repair value of a property is one of the most important skills an investor can have. Many investors use the 70% rule of ARV with ARV. So ARV after repair value times 70% minus repair costs equals max offer. The reason they use this formula is because if you're trying to implement the BRRRR method, the buy, renovate, rent, refinance, get your money back, start over method, most commercial lenders or most lenders on the back end will only lend you 70 to 80% of the property's value. 80% is really aggressive. A lot of lenders will do 75, and you'll hear 70 quite often. And if you want to do a deal with no money left in the deal, you want to be into the deal for a maximum of 70%. when everything's all said and done. All right. The one thing this is missing, and I would recommend, is add into your formula ARV times 70% minus repair costs, minus purchase costs, minus holding costs, and if it's a flip, minus out sale costs. Okay, so if you're buying a property and you want to perfectly burr out of it, you want to perfectly get all of your money back, you have to factor what it's going to cost you to buy that property. If you find a property on the MLS, or you find that even your neighbor says they want to sell you their home, there's going to be costs to buy that property. You're going to pay for title insurance. You're going to pay a transfer tax. You have a lender, you're going to pay lender fees. This can add up. In Philadelphia, the transfer tax 4.28%. If you're looking at a $500,000 property, it's 20 something $1,000. So that's a cost you have to factor when you're buying that property. Also, if you're buying it in your name and planning on transferring it to an LLC, you factor another transfer tax, right? So you have to know your costs involved in buying that property. And then your holding costs. If you have a loan, you're going to have a mortgage payment on it until it's fully stabilized. You're going to have property taxes. You're going to have insurance. You're going to have utilities. I mean, there's going to be a few things you need to factor, at least 6 months of holding costs into your evaluation of the property. And then there are refinance costs too. If you're planning on moving that loan to a different lender when you're completed, you have to factor what it's going to cost you to refinance, what the appraisal will cost, and what that lender is going to charge you. So if you really want to do a perfect deal after you figure out the value, it's ARV times 70% minus repair costs, minus purchase costs, minus holding costs, minus refinance costs equals the max amount you can offer for that property. Okay. Any questions about that so far? No. All right. So how do we determine the ARV or future value, right? What we're looking for when it comes to residential properties, so we'll start with residential properties, is the ARV, right? When you're looking for ARV, you're looking for comparable sales. So comparable sales are homes that have sold, or duplexes, triplexes, quads that are sold in that area. When I say that area, you want to be township specific, you want to be school district specific, you want to be home type specific. So if you're buying a single family rental, you don't want to compare it to a twin or a row. If you're buying a row, you don't want to compare it to a twin. These have to match up. These comparable sales have to match up. If they don't match up, it's not a comp. It's not something an appraiser is going to use. I'm going to have a hard time arguing your value. What I like to call it is the smoking gun comp. In my opinion, if I'm pricing someone's house to sell it or to invest in it, I want a comparable that an appraiser cannot say to me, the house isn't worth this, because I have a comparable that says it is, right? I want to have that, and I want to have that for myself when I'm investing. So if I'm buying a property and I'm planning on refinancing in 6 months or 3 months or 4 months, I don't want the appraiser to argue with me because I use some comp that doesn't make any sense, right? You also don't want to go back more than a year. Appraisers will not use comps, usually will not use comps that are more than a year old. Reason being, markets change, right? If your market changes within the year, rates go up and down, things change within a year. So most appraisers will not go back a year, especially in high density areas. If it's a more rural area, there's not a whole lot of sales, they'll push back a little bit further. But if it's, your average area, especially in our region, they're not going to go back that far. So you're looking for similar house types, similar neighborhoods. Sometimes when I'm running the comparables, I'll outline the neighborhood first, right? And you could tell the neighborhood because, and I'll show you. Can everyone see this Zillow screen I just pulled up or no? I have to share that screen. Okay, so first I'm going to start in the MLS, which is what realtors use. But if you're just an investor, we'll jump to Zillow so I could show you how to use that tool as well. But the first thing I look for when I'm comparing a property. So let's say all right, so let's say we're planning on buying this property, 1301 East Butler Pike and Ambler. What I'm looking for are sales that are nearby this property that have sold in the last year. I also like to look at homes that have been withdrawn. So for instance, if someone tried to sell a home and they removed it because it might have been overpriced, that's a good indicator for me on overall pricing. So what's up, man? That's a good indicator for me on pricing. Now when I talk about neighborhoods, obviously this home is on a busier street. You can see it's a thicker street. But if you're in a neighborhood like this, for instance, can everyone see this clearly?
Yeah.
So you can see just by the outline of the lots, they're all about the same size, meaning the chances are this entire neighborhood was planned out at the same time, right? There was the same builder at some point, might have been in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. Even today, when you look at new construction neighborhoods, it's the same lots, they plot them out, and they put the same houses on them. Now, with older neighborhoods, over time, those houses change, right? People put additions, they put dormers, they go up, they go out, and you have to get a little bit more creative. But the lot size stays the same, right? They don't add any more land, so it's the same lot sizes, which makes it easy to compare. So if I were looking for homes in this neighborhood, I wouldn't look at these houses because, as you can see, these lots are bigger, right? So these are probably bigger homes, whereas these are all about the same size. So you'll quicker find a comparable sale with a lot size that's similar to it. Things you want to factor in a neighborhood are if a home is on the outskirts of a neighborhood, so it's bordering a busy street, it's worth less, right? Not worthless, but worth less, right? So I in pre-COVID, and everything is BC and AC, right? Before COVID and after COVID. Pre-COVID, before COVID, I would tell sellers, usually you want to factor at least 25,000 less if you're on the border of a neighborhood, right? If you're near a two yellow line street, it's less attractive, right? People that are factoring they think about if they have kids, it's closer to a busy street. It might be more noise because you're near a busier street. This all goes into to pricing your home after you're done with the work. So it's things you want to consider. Now, since COVID has happened, people are a bit more aggressive. They just want to get into that neighborhood. So they might not care as much that the house is on a busy street, right? They still might get multiple offers on that house, and it still might sell and still will sell, because I've seen this happening for close to what, if not as much, but much closer to what the houses in that neighborhood are selling for, because people just want to get in, right? Appraisers don't look at that. They're looking at this as a rental property for you. So you always want to err on the side of caution and make sure that you compare your home to what you actually think the market value is, not what emotional home buyer is going to buy that house for, right? Because you're an investor. We don't invest with emotions, right? So this would be a neighborhood I would comp a house in this neighborhood with. All right, so I'm going to jump back and forth between these screens. Sorry if it gets annoying, but it's the only way I know how to do it. All right, so we're talking about similar size neighborhood, which is what we just looked at. Similar school district, right? Or same school district, especially in the suburbs. That's a huge difference, right? Not here to disparage school districts. I don't come up with the ratings, but if you're comparing a house in a school district with an 8 out of 10 versus a house in a school district with a 3 out of 10 school district makes no sense, right? 8 out of 10 school district will always hold its value and sell for higher. That's just the way it works. That's different in the city because the city is the same school district, right? It's all, if we're talking about Philadelphia, it's all Philadelphia school district. What you look at in the city is neighborhoods, right? People are neighborhood specific in the city versus school district specific. In the suburbs, make sure you're in the same school district. Or if you're looking at a bordering school district, make sure it's a comparable ranking to the school district you're looking in. Okay. And then recently sold. Again, don't go back more than a year. In Philly, you don't have to go back more than 3 months. There'll be 20 sales around that home. Some neighborhoods you might have to go back 6 months. In the suburbs, you might have to go back a year, but don't go any further because an appraiser won't. And when that appraiser comes out at the end to appraise your property and they say it's worth 300 and you thought it was worth 350, and you show them a comp that's 14 months old, they'll say this is too old. Any questions about any of this so far? No? Okay. Now, as realtors, we have the MLS. However, there's so many great sites out there for people that don't have a real estate license. So Zillow, there's a site called PropStream, which is essentially an MLS for investors. You don't need to have a real estate license to get onto PropStream. They do charge you monthly to be on it, similar to the MLS, but it might not be as comprehensive as the MLS, but it's very, very close to it. And if I were an investor and I didn't have a real estate license, I would get PropStream, and I highly recommend it. The other thing you want to look at is same/similar house types. So we kind of went over this, but you can't compare a Cape Cod to a colonial, right? If the home is 1.5 stories, it's not a 2-story house. They're going to sell for different prices. And honestly, in some areas, single-story homes sell for more per square foot than 2-story homes because it might be a neighborhood that people are downsizing to, right? And if people are downsizing or they're looking for single-story living, they're going to pay more for it than someone looking for a 2-story house because maybe they have a family and they want people upstairs versus downstairs. So ranchers have become super popular in the suburbs. If you list a rancher, the price per square foot versus what a 2-story house is selling for is significantly higher. And that's something to know. It's important for you as an investor because it might help with your rents if you're looking to rent to someone downsizing, but it also helps with your ARV. So consider that when you're looking at homes. You don't ever price something versus another home that's, in my opinion, more than 500 square feet bigger or smaller, right? If you're looking at if you're buying a 1,500 square foot home and you're running comps using 2,000, 2,100, 2,300 square foot homes, it's a completely different house. And you're looking at comps that are 1,000 square feet or 900 square feet, completely different comps. They're two very different houses. So always want to work in that 500 square foot range. That doesn't mean you can't look at a bigger house and use that price per square foot to kind of come up with a better ballpark for your home, for your property, but it's so different that I really don't recommend it. All right. Bath and bed count. Obviously, a 4-bedroom home is worth more than a 3-bedroom home in most areas. A 3-bedroom home is worth more than a 2-bedroom home, right? If you're looking at a multifamily property and it's a 4-unit with 3 2-bedroom units and 1 1-bedroom unit, and then there's another 4-unit with 4 1-bedroom units, first one's going to be worth more because the 2 beds will rent for more. It's a bigger property, most likely, right? So try to find, the glove that fits as close to as possible. You're never going to find, unless it's a new construction neighborhood, you're never going to find the exact same house, right? Even in Philly, where all these houses are built the same and they're row homes, the amount of tweaks people have made over the years. Some went open concept, some have taller ceilings, some are 14 feet versus 16 feet wide. There's so many things that matter that you're never going to find the exact same comp, but you can get close. Any questions so far? Sure.
What's your take on a finished basement versus unfinished?
So finished basement will always add value to the home. However, and a lot of people don't pay attention to this, but if a basement doesn't have an egress or a point of exit, it isn't livable square footage, right? So if your house is 1,500 square feet and you have a 500 square foot basement and you finish the basement and there's no walkout, there's no egress window, you can't say you have a 2,000 square foot house. It is a 1,500 square foot house with 500 square feet finished below grade, but it's not considered livable space because there's no fire exit, right? You can easily put an egress window in. They're not super expensive. I've seen some companies do them for $4,000 or $5,000, which, given the amount of size it's giving to your property, I highly recommend it. You know, a walkout might be a lot more expensive, different things to factor, but yes. And when you're, so this is a great example actually, because you brought this up. Great example. I have a lot of landlords that are buying houses in Delaware County, Sharon Hill, Collingdale, areas that have a lot of row homes. Because the values have gotten so high, it almost doesn't make sense to buy those homes anymore because they're so expensive. And when you refinance them, the rent doesn't justify what the mortgage payment is going to be for a 3-bedroom row home. However, most of those homes are built that they have walkout basements. So finish the basement, add a 4th bedroom, and now you have a 4-bedroom house that you can ask more in rent for. And it justifies buying the property now. So using the basement to get more value out of it is definitely a big plus.
What about garages? I've seen people convert garages into.
Yeah, if you can convert a garage, and that's something you want when you're running your comps. So this is great because in our market, with how expensive things have become, if you're looking at to buy a house in this market, let's say you want to stay in a market that's expensive, you have to find ways to get creative, right? Because you're not going to find the deal easily, but you can create a deal by buying a house and adding square footage to it, finishing a garage, finishing a basement, or converting it to a multifamily if the township allows it, right? But you would really want to check into your zoning before you go down that road, because a lot of times if it's a high density of single family homes, you get a lot of pushback converting to multifamilies. So, you know, check into that before you do it, but that's a great way to add value. You know, a lot of investors buy homes in college towns and make from a single family home, they make them 6 bedrooms with a common space. All of a sudden, that home that would have probably rent for $2,000 is now bringing in $3,500 because they're renting it per room versus for the house, right? So you can get really creative. Also, even areas like this in Swarthmore, they're proposing ADUs, I think is the acronym, but it's basically like creating an apartment secondary to the house above a garage, or just building one outside the home. Because cost of living has gotten so expensive, they're trying to make it more affordable for people to come into those neighborhoods. And these are really popular in like San Francisco and some of these areas that houses are just completely unaffordable. To even afford the house, a lot of people have to do ADUs to afford their mortgage because they have to have someone help them with it. So yeah, great point. All right. So, you know, we kind of went over this, but similar neighborhoods, bird's eye view is great. Listen, technology is on our side. It gets easier and easier to evaluate properties. You can do Google Street View to see the property, and usually they have a picture of it within the last 5 years. You know, could have only changed so much. It could get pretty bad, but you know, for the most part, it should look similar. The neighborhood should look similar. So Google Street View. We have satellite views. You could easily pick out some of the things I was pointing out in terms of lot size, types of houses, just by not even leaving your computer. You know, you're at your computer and you can evaluate a neighborhood. You can walk around that neighborhood on Google Street View and see what the neighborhood looks like. Now, obviously, before you actually commit, you might want to go drive the neighborhood. But if you've done it enough, if it's your market and you've evaluated it enough, you'll feel comfortable making an offer without even seeing it because you understand that market. But make sure the neighborhood is similar to the property you're purchasing, right? You could compare one neighborhood to another as long as they're similar, as long as they have similar size houses, similar age houses, all that. Same school district. School district. So this is, again, super important in the suburbs, not so much in the city, but in the suburbs, this is really what determines value. If you go back to 2008, when everything went down, the areas that got hit the least had the higher ranked school districts. That's the fact, right? So you're almost propping your value or hedging your bets by buying a home in a higher ranked school district. So if there isn't ever a market, if there is ever another market downturn, you will lose some value, but it's not going to hurt as much as some areas. And that's just, a fact. There are websites like greatschools.org, niche.com, niche.com, that do these rankings for you. So if you're ever looking at to make a market that's you're not familiar with your primary market, there's websites and resources you can use. It's not everything, you don't have to 100% rely on those websites, but it is a good barometer for what you're looking for. Right. So again, when it comes to comps, the fresher is better. Markets can change quickly. There's no perfect window, but last week is better than last month, which is better than last year, and so on. Appraisers are looking for the most recent comps, right? And our market is changing so frequently right now. As someone that sells a lot of real estate, I'm seeing when the rates dip down, buyers are calling us like crazy. When the rates go back up, all of a sudden our phone stops ringing. It's that seesaw-ish right now. And within 2 to 3 week windows, in late December, when the rates started to go down into the high sixes, it was like off to the races. And then a couple weeks ago, I've noticed some of those people that really were calling and we might not have found something, they kind of slowed down, pulled up the rates again. All of a sudden, we're back in the mid sevens, right? It's that predictable right now. And appraisers know that. So they know if the rates are 5.5%, you're going to get 20 offers on a $450,000 house. The rates are 8%, you'll get 5 offers on that house, right? The more expensive it is, the less people can afford it. The less competition you'll have, the less it gets bid up. Homes are more valuable when rates are lower, right? That factors in when you are looking at pricing for your home. Okay.
So is this for like are you talking more so like a flip when you're talking about pricing home?
No, we're talking, well, both, right? You could definitely use, this is definitely for flips as well. But also when you're doing a burr, you want to know what the property is worth at the end, because you want to be able to refinance out of it.
Right, yeah.
There's levels to value though, right? So I try to put homes in 5 buckets. If you're brand new construction where everything's brand new, you have a recently flipped home where it's either done really, really well or an okay flip, Then you have your standard home, which is home that's lived in. You have one that's great, where someone takes immaculate care of it. Clearly a sense of pride of ownership, has done a lot of recent updates. Then you have that mid-tier lived-in home, which is like, I call it the grandma home. Grandma takes care of their house. They take care of the windows. They'll replace the furnace. They'll replace the roof, but the kitchen's from the 80s, right? They don't care. They like the pink tile. That's their style. And that's okay. I love those homes because they are great houses. They just need a kitchen and some floors, That's the house you want. Especially if you're a first-time home buyer, buy that deal all day. And then below average, which is someone that clearly doesn't take care of their home. They don't have that pride of ownership. They don't do a lot of, and those are deals you're looking for as an investor. And then you have your lower deals, which are just either properties that need to be renovated immediately or super rundown. Landlord clearly absentee, hasn't been taking care of it. There's roof leaks, there's water issues, there's electrical issues, there might be bug issues. And then you have your knockdowns, which are just, knock it down, start over, right? And those happen a lot. So those are the buckets I try to fit all properties into, even multifamily, right? And I'm looking for below average, right? I'm not investing in average and above because there's not much equity there for me, right? As investors, we're looking for average and below, or below average and below. I don't necessarily want knockdowns, but I want something that has equity. So comps tell us what's happened in the past, but one of the most important aspects of the process is trying to see the future, right? Of course, we can't predict the future, but we can pay attention to external factors that affect our outcomes when we are selling. So this is for flips, but we're also looking at our rentals, right? When you're investing in real estate, you're planting a seed, all right? It's not, I'm tired of hearing these people say you're going to get rich overnight. It doesn't happen like that. This is an investment, right? It's just like the stock market. You're putting money in slowly over time and it goes up. And that's a more casual way of investing. And if you want a 6 to 7% return over your life and you feel comfortable doing that, then do that. Real estate, you can have a significantly higher return, but it takes work. It's a job and it takes time. All right. Now you might not have to wait till you're 65 to cash out. Maybe you cash out, in 20 years versus 40, but you're planting seeds and you're watching them grow. And when I have investors like, man, what if the market crashes, blah, blah, blah. Or even when we're selling a house to like a first-time home buyer and dad and mom show up and they're like, oh, what if it crashes? And you don't want to buy this, you're paying too much. And I say to dad and mom, like, hey, what did you pay for your house in 1983? And they're like, $80,000. I'm like, what's that house worth now? And they're like, $700,000. And I'm like, we had a crash in 2008, right? Yeah. I'm like, so what are you saying? Right? Every decade you go back, houses were worth less. It's only going to keep going up, right? They're not making any more real estate. So the values are only going to keep going up. And as our country becomes more valuable, that only helps our property values happen. Yes, there will be dips. Like a 2008 could happen again. But the people that held in 2008 are loving it right now, right? The people that bailed out because they thought this is terrible and they're never going to get their value back, they're probably kicking themselves, right? And I don't like to use 2008 as an example because that was a mortgage crisis. It was across the entire country. When you're talking about real estate, you should talk about it in your local market or the market you invest in. Right now, there are markets suffering. Austin is down 30%, right? Whereas our market's still up, right? So every market is different, right? Now, you might say it's down 30%, but it also went up 50%. So it's still a net positive, but every market's different. Understand the local market and understand that when you're doing this, you're planting a seed for what's to come. And you can, even if you go really, really, really conservative and say this property is only going to go up by 3% in value every year for the next 30 years, you could easily do a calculator on that and see how much that goes. It's a lot, right? And if it's a rental, as it's going up in value and your tenant's paying down the mortgage, your equity grows, right? But just like having a stockbroker, you have a property manager or yourself, if you're the property manager, and you have to manage that portfolio, right? You can't just expect it to happen and not do anything because property will fall apart. And then eventually the cost of fixing it up will be more than it's worth even owning anymore, right? So maintaining it, measuring it, making sure it's something that you treat like a true investment, that's super important. Any questions? Okay. The only outcome I can see affecting values, and this is crazy, but it's like another world war, like what else can there be that tanks American home values indefinitely? Nothing, right? Like there's really few things that could do that, and it has to be on a global level for it to happen. So hopefully that never happens again, and we're all hoping for that. So I feel confident to continue investing. Okay, so think about the time when you completed your project, whether a rehab or a rental, with it ready to hit the market. You have to consider a lot of things, right? Number one, like I said, I'm investing out in like the Pittsburgh market right now. I'm talking to all the property managers out there because I'm gathering my information. You could talk to one or two realtors, but realtors don't like there's property managers that are managing 1,000 units. They have a better sense of the rental market than a realtor that's rented out a few, right? So I'm talking to property managers saying, hey, what's it like? And they're all being honest with me. They're like, yeah, it's slower right now. We have seen a dip in requests. We've adjusted our rents down to make that happen. And that's something you factor. So you factor not what the highest rent is going to be on that property, but what the market is speaking for right now, right? When you get done, if you get lucky and the rents, if the market picks back up again, then you could get that rent. But you're always erring on the side of caution. You're always being conservative. So you want to consider that. So supply is a huge indicator. If you go on Zillow and you plug in rentals in Pittsburgh and there's a bunch of green dots that show up, red flag, right? If there's too many green dots, why are there that many rentals available, right? If you go in a market and there's one or two and you see a bunch of closed in the last 6 months, that means the market is soaking up those rentals very quickly. And that's what you want. If you're in a market where there's a ton available, you want to get a deal, right? That's reason enough for you to offer less on that property, right? So don't make it I'm not going to buy it because there's too much inventory. Make it I'm going to pay less for it because there's too much inventory. The landlord's trying to get rid of that probably. There might be some landlords panicking, right? I want to scoop it up. And there's ways to scoop it up with a panicking landlord. Maybe they'll finance it for you, So supply is huge. Seasonality. I have properties in Carbon County, PA, and the winters are terrible there, right? My rentals pretty much shut down from like November through March. It's really hard to place people because there's a ton of snow. I have to factor larger snow bills for those months, versus properties we have here. When I'm figuring out what my expenses are for snow and grass, it's way less than up there, right? So I figured that out after my first few years of owning the properties there. And now, if I ever have a tenant that leaves during the winter months, or I'm signing a lease during the winter months, I have it end in the spring. So even if I'm signing a lease in December 2023, it's not going to, I'm asking the tenant to stay until March 2025, right? Because I want them leaving when it's getting nice. It's going to be easier for me to rent my place. And you're like, well, why would a tenant do that? Why wouldn't they? They're getting a longer lease. I'm not raising the rents after 12 months. They have an additional few months at the same rent. And most tenants will be fine with that. Also, it's harder for them to find a place that time anyway. So why wouldn't they? So understand the seasonality of your market and build that into your, understand and don't make it, I'm not going to buy a place in a market where it's super cold or, just adjust when you lease. That's all, right? Growth and development is huge. Is it super predictable? No. But if you find out they're putting an Amazon factory there, then you're going to look in that market, right? But chances are a lot of people don't know that, and they're looking there too. So getting ahead of the hedge funds, with their algorithms is tough. But, if you live in an area and you're like, oh, I know, in 3 years they're planning on putting up this plant here. Whoa, right? So growth and development's huge. Targeting areas that are more rural, as we know, there's no more land, If you live in Delaware County, you know there's nowhere else to build a house. Like literally every lot's taken, right? So then you push out to maybe Chester County. Well, you see the borders of Chester County, closer to Delaware County are packed. But as you go out further to Kennett, West Grove, as you get closer to the Delaware/Maryland border, it starts to spread out again. Well, what's going to happen? Eventually, we're going to spread out more. And the people that are in Delaware County are going to push out further into Chester County. And those properties will become more valuable. So if you're buying a property that far out, your appreciation might be better than 3%. It might be closer to 5 or 6% over the life of that house, because it's going to skyrocket once people start building out there, right? An area like this that there's so much already, it's going to be more of a steady appreciation, because you're not going to have someone coming in and putting a new construction neighborhood that's selling for $1 million all of a sudden, right? That will happen out there. There's no room for it to happen here, right? Also, back to seasonality. This is really important with college rentals as well. If you own a property in a college rental market, understand that if you buy that property in October, you're too late, right? The rentals, everyone that needed to get a place is already in a place. They've been looking since January, February to get a place locked up for August, July, August. Once they're in there, they're not looking again. So if you're closing on a student rental in October and it has vacancies, it's probably going to stay vacant. So factor that into your holding costs, factor that into your pricing. Political and economic factors. I don't really pay too much attention to this, but because I'm not a big politics guy, but I don't ever want to own a rental in New Jersey, New York City. It's even hard for me to own my rentals in Philly. The harder the rental laws, the more tenants will take advantage of them. And I'm not saying landlords aren't to fault. A lot of these rules are in place because of crappy landlords. So like we did this to ourselves, not we, but you know, a few bad affects the whole group, right? But now that the rules are where they are in Philadelphia, if you have a squatter, you're out 8 months of rent immediately and $5,000 in legal fees. They have more rights than you. And even if you're the best landlord in the world. So understand where you're buying your properties or where you're choosing to be a landlord. Now that statistic will change from neighborhood to neighborhood in Philly, right? Based on price point, everything. But outside of Philly, most of Pennsylvania, I'm totally fine with buying rentals because the rules are normal. You know, if you pay, you stay. If you don't, a judge will easily give a decision for you to leave, unless there's some crazy factor that should be considered that the landlord's not considering, right? New Jersey and New York have really tough rules. California, there's states that are really, really tough to be a landlord. Understand that and choose where and where not to invest. And then economic factors. And that's pretty self-explanatory. Any questions so far? I see, Craig, you have your hand up.
Hey, William. Thanks again for all the information here. Going back to your last comment, where you said there are some states where it's tough to be a landlord. Is there any way for a new investor to discover where there might be stricter in areas versus others?
Yes, 100%. You could literally Google 10 worst states to be a landlord and you'll see a ton of lists because other investors put these lists out. I see them all over Instagram. But yeah, if you Google like worst states to be a landlord, there are lists and they rank them, like from the hardest to the least stringent on landlords. And I'm not saying that's a good thing. You want a middle ground, right? You want a state that isn't too lax on landlords, but isn't killing them either, right? Because that will encourage development. Like if you treat your investors, your landlords good, they'll upgrade their properties, they'll buy more, they'll take better care of them. If you treat them really bad, they'll stop or they'll be run down, right? So I'm not saying go after the easiest states, go after the states that are the most fair. And there's a lot of lists. And I can, if you want to send me a message with your email, I could send you a couple that I've come across as well.
Appreciate it. And is it more so around like zoning restrictions or taxes? Like what do you kind of look out for?
Zoning restrictions, yeah. All right, how do I say this without being political? Because I'm not. I'll be honest with you guys, I have zero interest in being political, but red states are usually easier to be a landlord. Pennsylvania is a blue state, and it's not hard to be a landlord here. So I'm not saying you have to vie away from red states, but blue states with like safe harbor rules and things that are tenant friendly are tougher to be landlords in. And that's why a lot of people invest in the Bible Belt, because they're all red states and they're fairly easy to be landlords. Again, I love investing in PA. It's a blue state, but Philly is very blue, and it makes it really, really hard. And that's just a trend I've seen.
Thanks.
Yep. All right. So another thing to factor is supply of inventory, if it's rising or falling. All things considered, supply has the greatest effect on demand. And when buyers have a larger supply of homes to choose from, it amplifies the effect of these other factors, because a larger supply gives a buyer a sense that they have time to consider things before buying. Looking at months of supply on your market, and watching the days on market to understand this trend is very helpful. So supply and demand, it's simple. Right now, we list a house in the suburb, it's gone because there's usually no other houses to compete with. List in the city, there's a lot of listings to compete with, and they're sitting longer. So days on market in a market where there's more inventory is higher, and days on market generally isn't good for your value, right? If someone sees a house sitting, the question is, what's wrong with it? Always. In this market, every buyer we work with, experienced, inexperienced, if a house is sitting for more than a week, they're like, what's wrong with it? Something's wrong with it. And that didn't used to be the case pre-COVID, but it is now. The house is selling for significantly over asking within a few days of being listing. It's a fair question. It is. It really is. And the easy answer is always price, right? If a house is sitting, something's wrong with the price. If you price your house right, it will sell, right? I'm not saying give it away, but be fair in terms of the market value. So you look at the rate of how quickly houses are selling in that market to factor if this is going to be a good investment for you or not. All right. If you're looking at a flip, especially, you can get a flip in that market and those houses are flying off the shelf. Great. What's the problem with that? Is if they're flying off the shelf, you're not going to get a good deal on that flip, right? You'll be bidding against owner occupants, not just investors, and it's going to be difficult to find that house at a good price. So usually you're buying flips in markets that houses are sitting, and you just want to factor that into your pricing. You will want to be more aggressive than the other houses listed, so price accordingly. Same for rentals. If it's sitting, houses are sitting, it's because that's for a reason. What's that?
The reason if they're sitting.
As a rental, a couple of things. One, price. Price still matters as rentals. So if it's a one bed in a market that they're renting for $800 and the landlord's trying to ask $1,100, people will know. And the only person, not the only person, but the majority of people that are willing to pay significantly more for rent are people that are willing to do that because you're willing to make a concession for them. Their credit's worse. They have big dogs. They have a lot of a lot of people living in the property. They have had an eviction before. People will pay more because they know they have to get someone to make an exception. if you want to play that game as a landlord, okay, you can, but you're taking more risk. More risk doesn't always mean more reward. You can run into another squatter situation, right? So pricing, inventory, there's a ton to pick from. Why would they, that yours is going to sit, right? Unless you're the clear-cut best option, you're not going to go fast. Time of year, when it comes to student rentals or vacation rentals, time of year, right? If you own a vacation rental on the Jersey Shore, there's probably a ton available during the winter months. If you own a vacation rental in the Poconos, probably not a whole lot available in the winter months, right? So don't look at it and see a saturated market and think, oh, this market isn't doing well. Could just be seasonal. Seasonality. Here we go. So do any of the following things impact pricing in your market? Absolutely. Time of year, weather, special events, holiday seasons. Special events is huge. Like even in Philly, right? If you own a Airbnb near the stadiums, when is it going to make the most money? During football season, right? So that's when you're probably going to bring in a lot of income, right? And with a lot of these sites having dynamic pricing really helps. Actually does the homework for you. It's great. Honestly, it's great to be a real estate investor because of the amount of technology we have. If you have these sites doing dynamic pricing, they're pricing higher when there's more demand and lower. You don't have to go and be a spreadsheet guy, and you don't have to do any of that anymore. It's all available to you. So understanding those factors, building it into how you plan out your income for that property for the year, which is huge because you have to run it like a business. So if you have a ski shop as your business, you're making all of your money in the winter, right? You're not going to spend the same in the summer as you are in the winter. So same thing happens when you're a real estate investor. If your property is going to peak in certain seasons, you spread it out so that you can last. Growth and development, like we discussed, really want to look at what is coming in your area and if that's going to lead to more jobs. I had a old coworker move to Alabama, and I was like, why are you moving to Alabama? And it's because they opened some sort of chemical factory in this area, and it led to a boom in jobs. And he bought a house, and a few years later sold it for a lot more than he bought it for, because people were looking for housing in that area, right? Colleges, facilities, distribution centers lead to income in that area, right? And if there's a boom of business in that area, values will go up. Look at Silicon Valley, for instance. That's like the tech capital of the world. You can't buy an inch of real estate there because of the development and the growth in that area, right? But that goes both ways. Like, for instance, Austin, Texas had a flock of people move to it during COVID, and a lot of industry, a lot of boom. But as that's died down and people started to kind of move back and settle, values have come back down. So you don't want to overhedge, right? Nashville, when that place was getting bigger and bigger, people buy an Airbnb there, it's going to do well. Well, things have settled a bit and values have come down. So don't expect it to stay high and continue getting high. Don't hedge on that, And then we've talked about political and economic factors. Election cycles, we talked about that. Interest rates, even the direction of the stock market can impact real estate values. Yes, a stock market, as much as I try to avoid it and invest in real estate, it still will always play a factor in our life. The thing about stocks is they can always issue more, right? Whereas with real estate, they can't. That's all we have. So unless we move to Mars. So keep up with the news. Don't let it keep it in perspective though. Don't let it become, too biased, good or bad, good or evil, red, blue, none of that. None of that matters. Just keep investing and you'll be okay. I'm not being dismissive of anyone's political affiliations. I just doesn't matter if you pay attention over time, you know. Always be aware of the pulse of your market. Pay attention to the general sentiment of the people in your network. Ask other agents and investors what they're seeing, what they're feeling. It's good to know, because if you feel like there's a nervousness in the market and you want to offload and move to a better market, you can, right? Remember, part of playing the real estate game is monopoly. You're leveling up. You're going from a single family and you want to get to the hotel eventually, right? That's real estate investing. It's just monopoly. And along the way, you do 1031 exchanges so that you don't pay taxes on the funds you level up with. It's what the wealthy do. It's what they've been doing. And if you're in a market where you feel like you've bought so I bought a property in 2018 in Philly, and I'm trying to sell it right now, and I plan on 1031ing the proceeds and buying in a different market, a more rural market, because I think there's enough equity in the property and I don't love it anymore. You know, it's been a difficult property to own, and I can go buy a 3-unit with that equity versus the 1 unit I have here. I'm going to do it, right? That's what a 1031 is for. Buying something of greater value, you're leveling up. The IRS sees that as you're stimulating that economy, so they're going to let you defer those taxes, right? You have to pay them at some point, unless you're super wealthy and you create a trust, and there's, you know, all sorts of vehicles for that. But you can defer them and level up. So if you feel like your market is getting too saturated or too nervous based on the investors you talk to, level up, like sell and move somewhere else, you know. And you can do multiple. You can clamp 3 of your properties together, sell them all, and take all the equity and buy something bigger, right? One of your best tools will be your perspective. Remember, try to take emotion out of the equation and focus only on the data. This is really difficult when you're a new investor, because you're very emotional. But when you're a new realtor too, you're very emotional. When you're a home seller, you're very emotional. You have to remove that, right? It's hard, but you have to remove it, and you have to only look at the facts. Because you put black granite countertops in your apartments does not mean an appraiser is going to think your apartments are worth more. Doesn't mean a tenant's going to pay more money for those units. That is a personal choice. It's not a business decision, right? So don't think that extrapolates. Like, it still goes with the market. Now, yes, when you're pricing that property out for sale, those are things the appraiser will factor into their value, but it's not going to put it absurdly above market value, right? It's just not. That was a personal preference you chose, and it doesn't mean it's going to make a difference or a significant difference in your value if you're looking to flip it or you're looking to rent it. And this is something that was really hard to learn, because, you know, as a realtor, I see people that react to things all the time. So when I was doing flips, I'm like, I want this to be perfect, and I want this to be this way, and I'll spend a little bit more to open this, just a little bit more. And you quickly realize there's no return on that, right? You quickly realize it's still what the ARV is. And unless it's a significant difference, like unless you're adding a half bathroom to the first floor or something that really functionally makes sense, people aren't going to spend significantly more because you used brass fixtures throughout and you tied it in with the crazy backsplash. Like, there's nice things you can do, but there's things you can spend too much money on that don't provide a return on investment. In rentals as well. Yes. And then, you know, the other thing is you can't renovate your way out of a bad market or bad neighborhood. And that's just the reality, right? If you paid too much, and that's what it always comes down to. If you paid too much and you put too much into it, you can't spend more to get more back. You can't, right? You're better off just selling it, cutting your losses and moving on, right? This happens quite often with We have a listing right now. This investor bought a property for us, knocked it down, built a beautiful house on it, but the house has no basement, borders a busy street, and he wants more than anything else is selling in that market for it. And we've told him multiple times it's not going to happen. It's like, all right, we'll try, you know, and it's just not happening. So then he asked our opinion. Well, what do you think we should do? And I was like, price it for what we told you to price it for from the beginning, right? And he's like, well, what if we take it off the market and we knock down the wall in the first floor, so there's not an office here, now it's a bigger open living space. And I'm like, you're not listening at all. It's like, stop. You're gonna go spend another 20 grand and you're gonna tell me you want to raise the price when I'm telling you we have to go this way, right? As an investor, take your emotion out of it. Doesn't matter what you want. It doesn't matter what you think that house should get. Because even if you get someone crazy enough to come in and spend 20% over market value on that house, how is it going to appraise? I still don't have the comps, right? And a buyer that has that much cash isn't probably going to make that emotional of a decision. So you still have to rely on the comps. And that house is, in a great example, in a higher ranked district and everything. So these are just some examples of evaluating deals. The one thing we went over fix and flips is 70% of ARV minus renovation costs is your purchase price. But remember, you want to add in holding costs, cost to purchase the property, and outsale costs. Outsale costs could be a transfer tax, could be cost to market the property with a realtor. It could be costs to rent it, like do fixing up things that come up in the inspection. There are things you have to factor outside of just your renovation. All right. So, and this is just a quick, easy example of a basic renovation. But if you're looking for like back of napkin math, you see a property, comes up online and you're like, wow, this looks great. They're asking 60,000 for it. And I know it's worth 200 fixed up. 200 times 70% minus what I think it's going to cost to fix it up ends up being 60 grand. You're like, oh, perfect. This is the great price to pay for this house. You make that offer. Now you're probably going to end up in a bidding war because other people saw that deal and they're like, well, I can squeeze it out for maybe a little bit less. So I'll pay 70. Don't get emotional. Remember what your math is and stick to your guns. And if you lose it, you lose it. There'll be more, right? The 1% rule. This is a lot. This isn't very common in our area. I hear about this a lot from countrywide investors. And the reason it doesn't work well in our area is, in my opinion, due to property taxes. The 1% rule is essentially the 1% rule states that the rental property's income should be at least 1% of the purchase price. So you pay 100 grand for it, you should be getting $1,000 a month in rent. That being, you're not getting anything for 100 grand around here, first off. Secondly, if you pay 200 grand for it, the taxes are probably, like if you're in Delaware County, the taxes are probably $5,000 a year. So that's $400 a month right there. Plus your insurance is going to be another $150 a month. So you're $550 in, and then you're factoring paying an 8.5% interest rate on that thing. So you're paying like $1,900 a month. The 2%, the 1% rule doesn't work because you're only making $100 a month if you're lucky, right? So I don't see the 1% rule working great around here. It's a general rule of thumb, but it does not mean that it works everywhere. Now, taxes are much lower in Delaware. Taxes are lower in Philly. So it's regional, right? Basic formula for a rental. And before we wrap this up, I am going to show you guys a more complex evaluation using cap rates. But basic evaluate formula for a rental. Income minus expenses equals NOI, or net operating income. This is important when you're evaluating multifamily properties over 4 units, because you're not using comps anymore. You're using an evaluation tool. Breakdown of your property. So The rent's $1,000. You're paying your property manager 10%, which is pretty normal. You know, I see anywhere between 8 and 12%. 10's right in the middle. It depends on what they're giving you. And if it's like an Airbnb property manager, I see 30% sometimes. You know, they charge a lot more because they're doing a lot more. So you minus that, you minus property taxes, you're always putting away for repairs and maintenance. You're always putting away for vacancies, your insurance, and then you have your operating expenses. And that's before you pay your mortgage. Just remember that. So if your mortgage is more than $410 a month, you're losing money on that property, right? And that, this right here says the assumption here is this is an all cash purchase, professionally managed, and no capital expenses. So that's why they're factoring a $410 as your total operating expense, because they're not factoring for a mortgage. You bought it with cash. So if you paid $100,000 for it and made $7,080 in annual income, your cash on cash return is approximately 7%, right? That's what cash on cash return is. It's how much you actually put into the deal and left in the deal, and what percent of that you're getting back annually, right? So using a financing example, you buy a house for, you do a perfect BRRRR. You leave no money in the deal because you've purchased it, you've renovated it, you've rented out, and you've refinanced, and you did your map perfectly, and you had no issues along the way, which we all know is like never happens. But let's say it does, and you get all of your money back. And after you pay all of your expenses and your mortgage, you're clearing $2,400 a year. What's your cash and cash return? A lot, because you have no money in it, right? So when people say, well, oh, you're only making $200 a month per door. Well, yeah, but I have no money in that deal. It's all found money, right? So yeah, it took time, it took effort, but when you don't have to leave cash in the deal, cash on cash looks really, really good. Now, if you're a institutional investor or you're investing in super high-end areas where the cap rates are like 4%, well, you're doing that because it's safe, right? Like these areas, you're renting to like a CVS, you know, or you don't have to worry about that corporation not paying their rent, you know, so you can take more risk, you know, and get a lesser return because it's going to be more consistent. So just a couple books. Real Estate by the Numbers is a great one. What every real estate investor needs to know about cash flow. Another great one. There's a bunch of great real estate investing books put out by the guys from Bigger Pockets, and you know, there's a ton out there. Like everything I've learned about real estate investing was through podcasts and YouTube videos. I literally have not paid for, I mean, I paid for it by making mistakes, but I haven't paid for any courses. Not trying to downsell anything that anyone does, but I don't think you need to pay 20 grand to anybody to teach you how to learn how to invest in real estate, because that's what most of these courses cost, right? It's all out there for free. Just listen and learn, and you will learn all of this for free. All right, so hopefully what we went over today will shift your way of thinking. I do want to share one evaluation of a multifamily property with you, just so that you get a quick screenshot of what that looks like. While I'm pulling that up, anyone have any questions? No? Okay. All right, so I'm going to use this one as an example. All right, so the reason multifamily, like I said, and we're talking about 5+ units, not 4 and below, or a CVS, right? Or a shopping center, or a hotel, anything that's not a 4-unit residential apartment building or less is considered in a commercial space. If you have a storefront with an apartment above it, a building with 3 storefronts and 3 apartments, however you mix and match, you want to look at cap rates, right? So to evaluate the cap rate on a property, first you need to know what the rent rolls are. So for this example, this property has 6 units, and this is just my spreadsheet. There's way easier ones online that are plug and play. I just have used this for years and I'm comfortable with it, but this is what you're actually paying in your rents currently, or what the tenants are paying currently. You have to do 2 evaluations. You do an evaluation based on what it's making now, because that's the value now. And then you do an evaluation of what it's going to be after you've purchased it, after you've raised the rents and done your renovations, right? So the now is, this was a 6-unit building, but only 3 were occupied. So we will remove those 3 from our income. So the income coming in on this property is $425, $475, and $625 per month, right? What does that add up to? It adds up to $18,300 per year in income. If you have any other sources of income, you want to factor that in. What are other sources? A garage that's rented, laundry, if you have coin-operated laundry machines, if you have a vending machine, those are all other sources of income, right? Then you factor your fixed expenses. So what are the things you're going to pay that are going to be pretty similar every year? Yeah, they might go up a little bit. Property taxes go up slightly. Electrical charges might go up a little bit. For the most part, they're fixed expenses. Real estate taxes, if you pay the electric, if you pay the heat, if you pay the water, if you pay the sewer, if you pay the trash, if you have laundry, but it's not coin operated, then you need to factor for the expenses. The insurance to own the property, landlord registration fees, which are your rental licenses, right? And then grass and the snow. If it's in an area that gets no snow, not have to worry about snow. If an area gets a ton of snow, you want to be aggressive on that number. These are your fixed expenses. So right away, your gross income was 18.3 and your fixed expenses are 17.3. So this property is already only making $1,000 and we haven't even factored the mortgage in, right? Then you have your variable expenses. The variable expenses are, always want to put away 5% for vacancies, 5% for repairs and maintenance, and 10% for property management. Even if you're not getting a property manager, still factor for it for a few reasons. One, the bank you're financing will factor for a property manager, because what they're concerned about is if they ever have to take the property back from you, they need someone to manage it and they need to make sure it's profitable, right? So build it into your numbers. 2, as you scale, you're going to want to get a property manager. You're not going to want to manage, 100 units by yourself or however big you get. So plan for it, right? And then admin, legal, that's like if you have it's a big building, it could be like if you have like a super on staff. If it's just a regular building, just doing your taxes, whatever it is, right? Those are your variable expenses. So this property is losing $1,800 a year, right? $1,845. So we don't have to go any further. We know it's a bad deal, right? But we need to know what makes it a good deal. Well, at the price they're asking, it's a negative 1.37 cap. Negative's not good. You're right. You're losing money. We already know this. But what we do know is that 3 of these units are vacant, and we're not factoring for those units yet. What we can do is use this terrible situation to offer less for the property, right? The property is not making money right now. The landlord wants to get rid of it. You're there to save them, but you're going to offer them less than market value for it, right? Because it's not making money. You haven't even looked at your mortgage payment yet. So the next thing you want to do is, what does this property look like after you buy it? So if you figured out that the market rents for those units that are vacant are $500 per month, now your income is doubled and your net operating income is $13,455 a year because you've added 3 units of rent, right? In addition, at this price, which is the market price they were asking, it's almost a 10 cap. 8 to 12 is the going range for most markets. It's good numbers. Those are good numbers. If it's well over 12, what's wrong with it, right? Like, might be a really, really tough area. There's something you're not factoring, right? If it's under 8, make sure it's a really strong investment because you're getting less than 8%. And right now you can put your money in the stock market and get 6 or 7 or 8%. So there's easier ways to make 8%, right? So if you're making less than 8, make sure it's a really sound investment, right? And then you factor in your mortgage, so your principal and interest, and you figure out what you're walking away with each year. This cap rate is what banks use to evaluate multifamily and commercial properties. This is what, as you scale up, as you go from a single family to a duplex to a quad, and now you're like, all right, I want to buy my first 8 unit. How do I figure out what this thing's worth? This is it, right? This is all you need to know. Are there other factors? Sure. But for the most part, if you run any deals through this and it passes the cap rate, it's cash flowing, and you know what your annual actual net profit is, and it fits your goal, it's a good deal, right? Use this, and I literally send this with my offers if I'm offering less. I'll say, hey, here's why I'm offering less. It's losing money. The numbers don't lie, right? Landlords lie about their numbers all the time. So if you see a deal and it's like a 16 cap, you need to pry as to what they're leaving out. Are they paying the electric bill for this property? And is it $8,000 a year? You know, are they paying? Is the water and sewer super high? Is it oil heat? And is the landlord paying it? Is there flood insurance needed? Is it in an area that the homeowner insurance is significantly higher? There's so many things to factor. Like, do they have a lot of capital expenditures? Is the roof constantly leaking? And instead of replacing it, they're just patching it. You know, do they have a lot of evictions that they have to account for? Figure out why the numbers look that good before you jump on it, right? There's not really that many steals of a deal out there. So if it looks like one, just get your guard up and dig a little bit deeper before you say, oh, this is a great deal, right? All right, so coming up on 8 o'clock, I am talked out. So any questions?
This equation is for commercial properties.
Yes, and commercial is anything over 4 units. It could be all residential units.
Oh,
So,
gotcha,
yeah, so a 10-unit apartment building, that's commercial,
Mhm.
right? Anything in that, yes, yep. Like I said, anything, shopping plaza with 3 different businesses, cap rate, right? There's other things to look at too with those. So when it comes to commercial, there's a triple net, double net, single net leases. Triple net means the tenant pays everything. They maintain the building, they replace the roof, they pay the taxes, they pay everything. You just own the land, right? And you're renting it to them. And that's very common in like shopping centers. You know, someone owns the land and then someone's putting a building there and running it. Sometimes you'll see warehouses for rent like that. That's triple net. Double net is like the tenant maybe pays all the bills, but you maintain the exterior of the building. Those are the trade-offs. And obviously, if it's triple net, it might be cheaper because the tenant's taking on so much, the landlord doesn't need to charge as much in rent. Right. So you want to factor those things into the equation, because you might say, well, this isn't that great of a deal, but when you figure out the landlord's paying for nothing, it's a great deal. Right. Awesome. Everyone good on the Zoom?
Yeah, thank you, William. This is great. Appreciate it.
Awesome. All right. Thank you guys for coming, and this will be saved and shared on everything if you want to review it. And I will put out what's coming up next month. Hopefully see you all then.